Hi, students. Welcome back to Psych 213. And then, so today we're going to talk about your lab number two and whatever that you did. And so today we're going to go over some of the stuff that what you should write on your lab number two, basically. Okay, so now before we start, there are several announcements I want to make. And then, so the first one that is going to be that there are going to be Zoom meetings starting from 6:30, which is our original scheduled time. And then this is going to go from Tuesday and Thursday. And then, so the Zoom meeting is going to happen about I guess sometime around like 30 minutes. And then so this is going to be any time that for me to answer if there are any questions that you want to answer on either on the previous lecture or on the PowerPoint, what that you're not clear on, or the stuff that such as like if you're not sure about what you should put on your lab report and stuff like that. Okay, and then of course like the lecture format is going to be replaced by this, and then so it's going to be available by 6:30 on every lecture date. And then the next thing, as I said before, is that your lab report is now extended to March 24th, so which is next Tuesday, okay? And you'll also find on Blackboard there is an updated syllabus. So now there are a few things that we need to change, and which is originally your lab three was going to be like a social experiment, which you guys work in groups, and that is obviously not going to happen because of the coronavirus. And then so what happened is that what we're going to do is we're going to replace that with something very similar to your lab 2, but just like on another construct. And now, so the grading for that is going to be originally you guys were supposed to have like a peer evaluation, but then what happened is that now we won't have that, and instead everybody will just get full credit for that peer evaluation. All right, so that's kind of like my gift to you. So which means everybody gets a full score on that. And then the next thing I also want to kind of talk about is that some of the deadlines for the lab report and for also the computer practicals are also going to be moved a little bit because we are slightly behind based on because we lost about like two class periods, and so we kind of wanted to make sure that whatever that we're doing, we still cover enough, so you won't have any problem going on to your advanced experimental classes and things like that. Okay, and the last one that I want to kind of talk about is your there. I'm going to say something about a model paper online, and this is going to be use for your formatting issue. So you can look at the model paper online, and then what you can do is you can take a look at that, and then you can see that this is what your finished lab report number one, lab number two is supposed to look like format wise. So this way you don't lose like a bunch of points. All right. Okay. Now let's talk about what you should write on your lab report number two. So your first thing you wanted to kind of talk about is, of course, is your abstract, right? So the first thing you want to talk about is the purpose of your current study, okay? So that should be your first sentence that you write. So you basically want to talk about what is the current study's aim, and then you can go on and talk about how practice affect influence the mental rotation abilities in terms of accuracy rate and processing time. So remember that when you were doing your um, what do you call that? Your online task, right? For the mental rotation, that you are supposed to have like to report two things, right? And at the end you ended up reporting four numbers for you got one for which is the accuracy rate on the first session and an accuracy rate on the second session. And you also had the processing time on the first session and then on the processing time on the second session. So this is what you want to report. Okay, and then the next thing you want to write on the abstract is the brief methods. All right, so brief methods means that you are not talking anything that is very, very detailed. So you just kind of briefly said that participants use computer online program to assess their abilities to mentally rotate objects. That's all. That's all you need to write. And then the next thing you want to say is results, whether or not it was significant or not. Okay, and then the last thing you want to say is the interpretation with the meaning of the result. So it kind of means that, so does this mean that practice can affect, or does it enhance with it? What doesn't it enhance the accuracy rate and the processing time of the mental rotation? Okay, and now let's move on to the introduction section. So this is going to be about 1 page long when you do it like double space. And so this should have 3 paragraphs. So the first paragraph you want to talk about is you want to describe the main purpose of the study. So you want to write something like the main purpose of the current study is to find out whether or not practice effect can impact the way we mentally rotate objects in terms of processing time and accuracy rate. Okay, and then so that's the first thing you want to talk about. The second thing you want to talk about is whether or not what studies that have been out there to really describe this phenomenon. And then so you want to kind of talk about mental rotation as a construct and how we can mentally rotate an object in our mind by just looking at it, and then we can match a target with something that we have mentally rotated already in our mind. Okay, and then so you do want to describe this, and then the way that you want to describe this is to cite studies that have talked about this previously. Okay, so the example down here that I give you is that, for instance, Shepard and Metzler back in 1971 have described psychological phenomena of mental rotation of three-dimensional objects. So this is something that you really want to talk about. Okay, and now when you are citing this, make sure that you are all citing all this in APA style. Okay, so this is very important. When you are not citing in APA style, you will lose a bunch of points. So make sure you don't do that. Okay, you make sure you absolutely cite in APA style. And then now the next thing you want to talk about in the second paragraph for the introduction, you just kind of want to talk about the practice effect. Okay, so now in order to talk about the practice effect, you do want to say something about how people's mental performance, not necessarily mental rotational performance, but mental performance can improve when they have repeatedly encountered the same mental task. Because so this is the old saying that practice makes perfect, right? So once you kind of go through that, and then you have a good idea that can really set you up to say, we really want to talk about whether or not the practice effect can interfere the way that we mentally rotate objects in our mind. Okay, so that's that. So basically, that's the second paragraph. The third paragraph, you want to describe the study's aim, which kind of say that, oh, you want to say something like, this current study aims to study how practice effect can influence our ability to mentally rotate object in terms of accuracy and mental processing speed. That's all you need to say. And then you also want to say something about how a brief method of how this can be done. And so we just want to say that we're going to have students from psychology class go online with a computer program to assess this. That's all you need to say. You don't need to go on to like very detailed aspects. So because introduction is not the method section, that all the detailed stuff goes into the method. Okay, but the next thing you would want to say, you need to be very detailed, and that is your hypothesis. So now think about it. If the practice effect kind of leaks out to all mental facet, that means that it should also affect mental rotation abilities, right? And then so you want to say something like, we expect that the second time, when the subjects are doing the task, their performance on both accuracy and also processing speed we should see an enhancement or improvement from the first time when they're not familiar with with the task. Okay, and so this is what we expect to find because of the practice effect. So therefore, our hypothesis is going to be that we expect that the second time performance on both in terms of accuracy rate as well as the mental processing rate are going to be enhanced or improved compared to the first time around. Okay, and so that's basically the introduction section. Okay. Now the method section, method section, the participants, you just kind of copy and paste what I wrote here. Now the design is that this is a true experiment because we are manipulating the first time and the second time, right? And this is just an effect that we're trying to look. All right, now this is a repeated measure design because all participants went through both the first session and the second session, right? And then, so the dependent variable in this case, we have two. One is the accuracy rate, and the second one is the processing speed, right? Do you guys remember like the first time, both time you have to write down what is your accuracy rate, so how many times you get right versus wrong, and then the second one is how long did you take to get that answer, okay? So that's your dependent variable. Now our independent variable is the order of the task, and which has two levels. And so the first one is the first trial, and the second one is the second trial, right? And the difference between that is going to be the practice effect, right? Because the second time you have you already have gone through, you have an expectation effect that you know what is going to happen, and then therefore your mind is already anticipating what is going to come, and also you got a little bit better and a little bit more familiar with the task as opposed to your first time you have basically have no idea what you're doing, right? And then so this is the practice effect that we're trying to study. All right, now the third one that we want to talk about is the apparatus and the material. So this section basically says that what kind of computers, electronic instruments. So for you, it's going to be the kind of computer that you used, okay? So for us, unfortunately, we didn't do this in the lab because of the obvious reason of the COVID-19. And then so for all of you guys are going to be slightly different. So for this lab, what you want to write is to kind of write down the dimensions of the monitors and also the computer that you used for taking this for this task. Okay, and the next one, so also in this section, you also want to kind of put down what kind of instruction sheet was used, because we posted this on Blackboard, and it will state the online address of the site toolkit. Okay, and then the next thing about the methods is that the procedure, right? So this is for you to kind of describe what you instructed to do. So you can take out your instruction sheet that was posted on Blackboard, and you can say this is exactly what we did. And you can also go back to the website and then really go not trial by trial, but go like step by step and have a good idea what you were exactly to do. And then now the thing that's really important is to make sure that you state that there were 5 practice trials that were really easy, right? Followed by 10 real trials. And you also want to state that the fact that the score that you got from the 5 practice trials does not count toward whatever score that you got at the very end, okay? Because they did not count. It's the 10 real trials. It's the score from that counted toward your score, right? And so that. And then the next thing you want to talk about is to describe what you guys were instructed to do to complete the same session twice, right? So So there was time that you did your first time, and then the second time you were, and then you did it like a second time, right? And then after you were done with that, you were instructed to report the results to the experimenter, which is me, the professor. Okay, and the very last thing, which I'm gonna show you how to do it, and is you want to kind of discuss how we conducted the results with Microsoft Excel with a t-test. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys how to do like the t-test part. Okay, but in a separate video. Okay, and the next thing we want to talk about is the results. So you want to first describe the descriptive statistics. So which you want to go and kind of talk about the mean and the standard deviation. So the example that I gave you here is that so this is an example sentence. So the mean accuracy rate for the first and second sessions were whatever, and standard deviation or whatever, and blah, 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 respectively. And after you say this, you want to say this, you want to refer this to table 1 and figure 1. Whatever that applies to this, you want to kind of briefly describe it. Okay, so that's descriptive stats part. And then the second, you want to go and talk about the inferential statistics. So for us, that's going to be the t-test part, right? And so you want to say that, for instance, you want to say something like there is a statistical significance with a practice effect and accuracy rate, and then the t equals blah, 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 and followed by a comma, and p-value is less than 0.05, and then you want to talk about, you want to refer this to the figure that gave you such results. Okay, now, so how many tables and figures should you have? So in this lab, you're going to have 2 tables and 2 figures. And so table 1 is going to be on the accuracy rate for the first and second session. And table 2 is going to be the processing speed for the first and the second session. Figure 1 is going to be the bar graph on the accuracy rate for the first and second session, and figure 2 is going to be the bar graph on processing speed for the first and second session. So and then you were able to find this on the Excel file under lab number 2 stuff, and very similar to your lab number 1, you are responsible for making your table 1 and your table 2. Okay, so I'm going to make the figure 1 and 2, and then all you need to do is to come up with the correct figure caption. Okay, and so we'll also kind of discuss about what figure caption you should put at the end. Okay. Okay, so that's about the results. And then now the discussion. So you will see that the discussion, this is something we have not talked about previously, but the discussion you want to talk to them about in 3 paragraphs. So the first paragraph, you want to say something about the summarization of the results. So what is your main finding? So you want to say something about what the results are of the current study without reporting the number, because you reported numbers already in the results section, right? So the first paragraph of the discussion is always about what the interpretation of the results mean. Okay, and so say things like there is a significant effect of the practice effect on the accuracy rate, as well as the mental processing speed, in which that the second effect, so the second session is much better than the first session, something like that. And okay, so that's the first paragraph. Now the second paragraph you want to talk about is you want to compare with the previous published studies, which so kind of talk about the studies finding match their other studies finding. So in other words, you want to take our results that we got from our study and compare to a similar study that may also look at, let's say, a practice effect on mental rotation. That would be the most ideal. And or you can talk about, was there a practice effect on some other mental constructs? You can talk about that also. But the most ideal way is to look at practice effects on mental rotation effects. And then you can kind of really compare and kind of have a good idea whether or not our study and their study had like a good match with one another. Now, if it's not the same results, what contributed to these different results? Was it because we have different male and female ratios? Was it because uh, our the method were different? So this is where you need to look very closely into the nitty gritty details, the difference between our study and their studies. If such things if all these different factors may have contributed to all these different findings. Okay. And then the next thing you want to talk about is to suggest that what can future studies do and improve that. Okay, so the most important thing, because you want to talk about how can future studies do better. So for instance, we don't know if there is a male-female differences, but there are actually plenty of studies that have done that. So this is something you can cite that study and say that future studies may want to use exactly the same paradigm that we used the for the uh, for the site toolkit stuff, and then we can take a look at that and see that whether or not there were male or female differences. Another thing that can be contributed to this difference is like the wide age gap that we have in our studies, right? Because our age gap is, let's say, from 18 to 50, for instance, and then our class has a lot of different age range, and this could have also contributed to all the differences. And so these are something you can recommend for future studies to kind of tease out more of these differences to add another facet to really make the study more complete. Okay, and then the last thing you want to talk about in the discussion session is always followed by an ending that summarizes the whole conclusion of the paper, basically. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is the references. Uh, so I think usually I would require 5 references, but I think for your second lab, I only want 3 references. So let's just imagine if you have one reference. Uh, so let's imagine if you have one references in your intro, and then you have 2 references in your discussion, then I think this is going to be plenty of things to kind of talk about. So in the intro, you can use, let's say, the Shepherd-Metzler to kind of describe about what mental rotation, the whole phenomenon is, and then when you get to the discussion part, you can cite 2 studies that have looked at practice effect and mental rotations and how this can really contributed similarities with differences compared to our studies. Okay, and whatever you do, just make sure you cite them in APA style. All right, and so in the next video, I'm going to go over some of the numbers for the results section. And then so just look for that next video. Okay, thank you.